All men can see these tactics whereby I conquer, but what none can see is the strategy out of which victory is evolved. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Ancient emperors, Roman generals, medieval kings, uncomfortably modern US politicians, and pigs in Skyblock. What do all these have in common? They've all successfully used the art of war to their advantage. The art of war is a classic of the ancient world, and widely appreciated in many circles, including the Skyblock community. However, I feel its use in the fine art of high-pixel bedwars has not yet been fully utilized, and in this video I will show you how to truly exploit it to its fullest potential. This is the first part of a video series on how to utilize strategy instead of skill to win bedwars. I've noticed a severe lack of actual bedwars strategy videos, and whenever you do find one, it's either a 600-star sweat showing how to win the game by ladder clutching with a team full of people who grind the game 8 hours a day, or a more mainstream YouTuber just simply listing off overly specific tips along with vague general advice under the guise of strategy. In this 3-part series, I'd like to actually delve a lot deeper into the decisions, mind games, and instincts that make up bedwars strategies, and how to make up your own and effectively counter others. I'm hoping this series can spark a more strategic-minded community and show that you can actually use strategy to win, even against a more skilled opponent. The first video will cover strategy, the second technique, and the third how to combine them. The Art of War is split up into 13 parts, so likewise this video will focus on the 13 different topics covered in the book, and how they relate to strategy in bedwars. Timestamps are in the description. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. Laying Plans. If you know the enemy, and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. There's never one best plan or strategy in bedwars. It will always depend on the situation. When you start the game, you want to observe what your opponent is doing. On the first rush, if all else is equal, the player who rushes second is always at an advantage. Why though? It has to do with height. In bedwars, whenever two players are on bridges of differing height, the player on the top bridge can always simply drop down and knock the opponent on the lower bridge off, and if that lower opponent is bridging at the time, not fall off himself either. Now compare that to what the person on the lower bridge can do. Their only option to fight the player above them is to build up, which makes them almost as vulnerable as bridging. When bridge fighting, the high ground is always to be desired, which means to get back to our original point, the second player can simply see the angle at which the first player is bridging, and bridge at a higher angle to make sure they get a height advantage. To compound this, if they start late enough, they may also have more blocks than the first player, meaning they can actually afford to go higher and still get to the other base. As long as they don't start so late as to let their opponent get to their base, the second player will always win here. Once you have the art of seeing what your opponent is doing and reacting accordingly down, you already know the enemy, and have the hardest part of this down. To know yourself, simply recognize your limits and play comfortably within them. Fancy tricks more often than not end in failure, and learn new skills to complement your strategies, rather than learning new strategies to complement your skills. Always head into a fight with a plan, and you will always leave with victory. Chapter 2. Waging War. In Chapter 2 of The Art of War, Sun Tzu tells us to always pay mind to the cost of provisions for any army. Translating this into bedwars, it is obvious he was talking about resource management, and why buying 23 fireballs, 2 pop-up towers, and a stack of sponges before spamming the enemy base's fireballs from the other side of the map where their bed defense is completely covered in glass isn't a good idea. No, in case you're wondering, this is a completely hypothetical scenario. Always buy the minimum amount you need to accomplish a task, but be sure not to pinch on pennies when it could lose you dollars. Blocks are cheap and will save you a surprising amount of times. Always buy more than you need. Weapons aren't usually necessary unless your PvP style doesn't involve avoiding any confrontations that remotely involve skill and tapping people off the edge. And if it does, then, let's be honest, all of our PvP styles involve that. If you're stuck in a stalemate with another player, instead of continuing to rush their base, instead start grabbing as many emeralds or diamonds between fights as you can get away with without losing your bed. Once you get enough of an advantage, you can break the stalemate and crush your opponent. Chapter 3. Avoiding Battle. To win the war, one must not waste energy on fleeting victories. Do not engage in any unnecessary battles if you can avoid them and be better off for it. As Sun Tzu said, to fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. If your opponent has a bed and you don't fight them unless it gives you an advantage greater than the risk. Fireball jump over them, or trick them into following you into an obscure area of the map. You can delay them while you reach their base. If there are 3 players left and the other 2 are fighting, don't engage either. Gather your strengths and always be prepared for one to lose their bed. The moment one does, pounce on the one with stairs left. Always attack the stronger of 2 opponents, and never let the greater threat gather strengths. Identify high stars before the match. Keep plank on you at all times. Look for people with high FKERs and win streaks, and watch out for matching skins. Or you could just see if anyone has a lowercase o in front of their name. Both methods are probably equally successful. Chapter 4. Tactics. One of the most important parts of Bedwars is having a coherent strategy for how to win the game. If you always know what to do in every situation, and can then do that, you'll never lose. Always consider which choice's outcome would most benefit you when making a decision. If rushing a base, which is most important for you to kill, and what bases do you want to leave? As noted earlier, if two enemies are wasting their time and energy slaughtering each other, it is unnecessary and unwise to intervene. If, however, there is an enemy base close to your bed with no nearby rivals, it is the optimal target. Always prioritize the greatest threat. If an opponent poses no threat to you, there is no benefit to eliminating it. Instead of rushing every base possible during the game, consider going mid after your first rush to gather better equipment and make later rushes easier. If you don't have a bed and are facing multiple enemies, buy a punch bow and watch them suffer. Chapter 5. Energy. Minecraft PvP is at an incredibly low level, intrinsically tied to energy and the holding of initiative. Because you can hit someone from further away if you're running towards them than if you're running away from them, combined with how respawning works in Bedwars, it is always better to be on the offense than on the defense. Combine this with always being in control of the situation, and all of your enemies' moves become trivially easy to counter. Be sure to always keep the initiative. If your enemy is always on the back foot, you keep control of the situation. Chapter 6. Weak and strong points.
The art of war teaches us not to rely on the likelihood of the enemies not attacking, but rather on the fact that we have made our position unassailable.
Wait... Hold on. Wrong game. In Bedwars, there are good and bad positions to attack people from, and good and bad positions to hold. Often, positioning is even more important than PvP in Bedwars games, both on the micro and macro levels. Say, for instance, you are in a 1v1 and have the capability to hold the enemy at any point, but not to break their bed. Where should you hold? There are different points in Bedwars with varying importance. Mid is the best possible spot to hold, as the value of emeralds is always greater than what diamonds, iron, and gold can get you. Mid on most maps is also easily defendable against someone trying to attack it from a bridge. Speaking of bridge fights, positioning is also important here. By simply standing on an island and knocking people on a bridge coming towards you off to the side, you can win almost every fight with absolutely no PvP skill required. Hitting people to the side can also be used when both parties are on a bridge, but it is more risky. Chapter 7. Maneuvering. While half of Bedwars is PvP, half is positioning, and half is forgetting what mass is, the other half is winning fights against people far better than you by knocking them into the void. And how do you do that? Well, positioning is one, but also maneuvering. Take this fight I did against Photon. He's better at PvP than me, so I knew I needed to get him into an advantageous position to win against him. Luckily, I'm better at bridging than him, so I got to mid first and got to choose the position of the battle. If he didn't strafe here, he'd be knocked off, and if he did, I could knock him into one of the fire pits. He did end up strafing, and I won the fight due to the fire damaging him and messing up his movement. I decided against gapping here because the position here was more advantageous than an extra 2 hearts. I only won that fight because I maneuvered him into that fire pit mid-fight. Most of PvP in Bedwars, if done properly, can be done solely with maneuvering yourself so that you're in a position where you can easily hit the enemy into the void. Chapter 8. Variation of Tactics. Despite all the strategies mentioned here, not one of them will win you every game. You need to always change your approach depending on what is best in the situation, and above all, be unpredictable. Study your enemy's movements, and plan out your own to always be what he is most unprepared for. If you usually head straight into bridge fights, build up and TNT jump instead. If you usually try to avoid bridges and fight on land, block trap them. If you can always predict the enemy's movements and respond appropriately, you'll never lose. This is the most critical part of everything. As long as you have the necessary skill to perform whatever strategy necessary to counter the enemy, you do not need any more. Hone your skills to serve your strategies, not your strategies to serve your skills. If you can perfect this, you've truly mastered the art of war. Chapter 9. The Army on the March. Humble wards and increased preparations are signs that the enemy is about to advance. Violent language and driving forward as if to attack are signs that he will retreat. Sun Tzu. The Art of War. How do you read the enemy and always know what they're planning? Instead of thinking about what they will do by their current actions, analyze what they plan on doing by why they're doing their current actions. It is a small distinction, but an important one. This, nothing else, is the most important step towards knowing the enemy. Analyze everything your opponents do, what they plan on doing, and how you can counter that. Always be 2 steps ahead and force your enemy into vulnerable positions. Chapter 10. Terrain. Sun Tzu makes the distinction here between 6 different types of ground. Most of these are completely useless for Bedwars, so we're going to be compressing them all down to just 2 types. High ground and low ground. When is each type preferable? In nearly every other game mode in Minecraft, it is universally advantageous to control the low ground. However, in Bedwars, the opposite is often true. While it is true that being lower than the enemy gives an advantage in PvP, there are many situations where having the high ground is advantageous. In bridge fights, you can easily knock the opponent off if you have a higher bridge, and when attacking a base, you always want the high ground so you can drop TNT from above. And in almost all non-PvP situations, having the high ground promotes a greater degree of flexibility than having the low ground. So whenever you're not in direct PvP, always try to gain the high ground over the enemy. You can always negate it with no downsides with the ladder clutch. Chapter 11. The 9 Situations. Before we can proceed further, we must cover the different types of ground, represented in the Art of War as the 9 situations. Dispersive ground, facile ground, contentious ground, open ground, ground of intersecting highways, when you are behind or ground that is advantageous to both sides, contentious and fighting ground is gotten so structural to keep these battles not avoid possible battle roads get thrown out of fair, which is generally best to avoid fighting ground, any ground that is difficult ground, and any ground that Wait a minute. What am I doing here? In school, I always hated those history tests that were filled with nothing but names and definitions that didn't actually include any useful information once you got down to the bottom of it all. I made this video to be useful and intuitive to help players get better at the game, not shove definitions down everyone's throats. What am I doing here? Do you really need to learn about 20 slightly different descriptions of terrain that are never going to be used anywhere again for the rest of your life? Or even the book? Is this really what strategy is? Chapter 12. Attack by fire. Screw tactics, screw strategically sinking, everything. Everything must burn. Fireball jump, TNT jump. Fireball your enemies, fireball your teammates. Don't go mid, go to each individual base, killing the team members there to buy more fireballs. And then, unleash your wrath. Chapter 13. After you kill your teammates and purposely delay games until dragons when there's no point, you might want to consider taking advantage of the ability to spectate, so like, have your teammates watch over you and stuff, but no. No, this can't be it. This can't be it. We have to build the greatest Bedwars spy network the world has ever seen. Purposely lose your bet at the start of the game and have all your teammates die immediately. Then, assign one to spectating every team and have them rotate selection of every area of the map. Observe all possible information. Become the internet. Finish a video. Predict your enemy's every move, every step. Infiltrate their minds, they know none of yours. Anticipate every possible scenario. Win every fight. Never be caught surprised. Gain total control of all. Discover immortality and glitch the game into never ending. Share the secrets with the remaining players of the game solely to keep them trapped there forever. Slowly but surely degrade their minds and turn them into blithering messes of former human beings as they slowly and inevitably descend further and further into insanity as you torture them forever as punishment for the mere thought that they could ever hope to challenge you. Your newfound invincibility in Bedwars to skyrocket on YouTube. If you get banned, grab the admins with 3 Bedwars ones. Pass, stream, and subs. Start to influence the presidential elections. It should be easy enough because people are already so angry that you can easily take it over after showing the moderators Bedwars stats. Pack support. Start a new Cold War with China to justify increased surveillance measures over the populace. Start replacing key election officials with your own men. Eliminate all opposition. Approve increased funds into NASA to start exploration and domination of the solar system. The second space race has started. Use the first to land your nation on Mars as a symbol of strength, and then prepare for a land invasion. Mad stops wolfing once you get perfect ICBM protection. Assassinate key foreign officials, and then infiltrate the United Nations and turn the last possible barrier to world domination into a threat from your own planets. Become God. So, yeah. Predict your enemy's movements, always be a step ahead, and learn new skills to serve your strategies. Next video is going to be discussing how to get better at PvP and Bedwars with slow CPS.